the first thing that you need to do when you have an idea for a project is to start working it out, figuring it out, deepening it, and testing to see if this is actually something that could be a story, or if it's just a cool idea, but it doesn't really have legs as a story, because that's definitely something that's true. Really, what makes a story, and I've talked about this in other videos, and there are certainly tons of books and other videos on it, is you have a character that is in some kind of crisis. There's conflict, they have a goal or something that they're trying to do, and then the story is going through this journey with them as they are transformed and changed by the journey. And one of the things, I've talked about in other videos is how important the question why is. Why is this character doing this? Why is it happening here? Why this color? Why this prop? Why this nemesis? Why this line of dialogue? Why is a never ending question that you can apply. And I've definitely gotten pushback over the years where people will look at this kind of black hole of why and ask me why it's worth it. They had an idea and they thought it was cool enough and it's funny, or whatever it is, that should be enough. And the problem with that is that your characters will eventually be embodied by actors. Your stage directions will be fleshed out into real life by production designers and prop masters and wardrobe, makeup and hair, and then eventually go to the editor. And if you have not really strengthened and deepened the why of everything and understanding these characters and their world and the conflict and all of that, and really tested it and tried out other things and gotten feedback from other people to, again, test it out, sharpen it, strengthen it, then when those production designers ask you questions so that they can better play this character, you won't have the answers, and you don't have time on set to answer those kinds of questions. You just need to focus on the refining elements, making sure you're getting the material that you need to edit, refining performance, and all of that. And so one of the things that I always do for my characters is to do a background, like a biography of who this character is. And I pick a birth date, I pick where they were born, who their parents are, what their childhood was like, who was their best friend. There are different ways. Again, so many books tackle this in different ways. One of it talks about, what is their wound that they never recovered from, and a judgment that they made about themselves that informed kind of who they became and how they approach the world. All of these things are different ways of discussing the same thing, in the same way that narrative arc is always a narrative arc. But what you want to do is to treat your character like a real human being. And I always find it helpful to think about yourself. What are some of the things that you assume about yourself or know about yourself, and why do you know that? And have those assumptions ever been challenged? And what did it feel like to be challenged in that way? And what did you do? And think about your behavior, and think about where your behavior and where your identity or your thought process, how you think about things might differ. How you might feel one way about certain things or think certain things, but then you end up finding yourself doing the exact opposite. And All of these things make very interesting characters. So you want to, again, really dive deep. There is no end to that dive. And so it can be exhausting. You really want to do this for every major character. To a certain extent, every small character is a main character in their own life, and we're just meeting them at this intersection with these other characters. So they deserve a certain amount of scrutiny and understanding as well. Also, the actors playing those small roles will have a process and will want to bring something important and make sure that their performance is weighted. So you might have a really tiny role and an actor asking you very important questions or important to their process about who this character is. And if you're kind of like, well, I didn't really think much about that character because it's got like one line and they just need to do this, that's a disservice to your actors, to the craft, to your own storytelling. You really want to strengthen it. And I just think that, sure, things can be fun, things can be inspired. It's, sometimes we think of something and it's like, oh my god, where did that come from? It came out of nowhere. But you don't want to have these one-off inspired moments to only be one-off in your story. What you want to do is then anchor it and repeat it in different ways and really make it part of the storytelling aesthetic. And you can't do that if you only thought of it one time and you don't really know why it works and you don't really know what it's doing in the story, because then you can't build on it in any way. You can't set up jokes to pay off later or some kind of big reveal. The more you thread these things and understand them and deepen this inspired thought that works in this moment, the more you can then build that throughout the story and really strengthen the storytelling overall. So it really pays off in the end. And at the same time, you can't, if you rely only on your inspiration, then what happens when you have writer's block? Or what happens if you're not inspired, but you want to make a movie? You can't learn from genius. You can't learn to be a genius, but you can learn from understanding why things work. And then you can apply those tools and you can apply those principles in order to make things work in your story. And that is really the work that goes into being a filmmaker. It's not just inspiration and glory. You have to work. And it is work to make stories work and to put the thing together in production and the edit and all that stuff. So everybody loves the feeling of inspiration and the feeling of some joke that lands and how amazing that is. And that's great. And that's what you want your audience to walk away with, that feeling of like, oh my god, that was inspired and hilarious. But it takes a lot of hard work on your part to actually craft that and to actually make that work, and understanding the why, understanding your characters, making sure that everything that you're setting up is rooted in who that character is, what they're trying to go for, what their world is like, what are the things that they're avoiding, just understanding them as like a flawed human being. And as we've talked about in other videos, how to then present them with exactly the conflict that is going to cause them to change and transform. And this applies even over short films. Nobody should be making a short film that's like, oh, well, who cares? It just was fun. You should make something that is actually saying something, or that is actually presenting something that, yes, is fun, but is really impacting people in a way that's going to help move your career forward. So Otherwise, it's just lazy.